Hello class, and welcome to This Week in Developmental Psychology. This week we will be covering middle adulthood. My name is Dr. Neil Soggie and I will be your instructor for this course. So this stage of life is truly as multifaceted as any other. It is a period of negotiation and renegotiation across the three main aspects of human existence: the physical, the psychological, and the social aspect. So there's a lot of adjusting that's going on in middle adulthood, and it isn't just about settling in for the long haul, as some people will imagine. Our concept of self may not be fully ours to shape or to control alone. How others see us and their expectations of us are age-sensitive as well. Now, from the developmental perspective, middle adulthood, or midlife, or middle life, or middle-aged, refers to the period of the lifespan between that young adulthood and old age. This period lasts from 20 to 40 years, depending upon how these stages, ages, and tasks are culturally defined. The most common definition by chronological age for middle adulthood is from 40 to 65. But there can be a range of up to 10 years, from 30 to 75 on either side of these parameters. And research on this period of life is relatively sparse, and many aspects of midlife are still relatively unexplored. In fact, it may be that this area is the least studied period of the lifespan because it's kind of considered to be that settled period. And really, over the past 100 years, life expectancy, particularly in North America, was about 54 years, and how individuals prepared in middle adulthood for living longer and being part of an older community really kind of assumed that. And it's only in the kind of more present age, when our age expectancy has shot so far up and we now are faced with living through this entire long period and adjusting to the many movements within the community and within careers, that we are expected to be much more flexible. Now, of course, during this time, this has always been a time when people have been expected to be involved in public policy, in community activities, in economic activity, or being economically inactive. Now, there are some developmental tasks that are to be found within midlife adults. Some of these will include losing parents and experiencing some associated grief with that. Now, that's not for everybody, but for the majority, this is a time of adjustment and beginning to recognize your mortality. It's also launching your children into their own lives and adjusting to home life without children. And we often call this the empty nest or the empty nesters. It's dealing with adult children who will oftentimes return home to live at home. We call these boomerang children. There is the task of becoming grandparents and preparing for late adulthood, and acting as caregivers for aging spouses or aging parents. And if you take these singly or together, they can represent a fundamental reorientation of your outlook, of your investments, of your view of life, of your attitudes and your personal relationships, which can present formidable obstacles in terms of social and economic challenges. They may also be affected by circumstances outside of your control at a time when people generally envision that they have their life under control and well planned out. And so there can be some nasty surprises that come along with middle adulthood. Now, having said all of that, this is still the time when people earn the most, succeed the most, gather the most wealth. And so it is true that this is a time of greater, generally speaking, financial stability and success for many people. But there are some significant things that happen. One of those basic things is changes in weight and height. The trends of aging first appear in early adulthood, and they continue to occur in middle adulthood. And there are some sex differences evident in both weight and height during this period. However, men show an average decrease in weight, whereas women show an average increase in weight during middle age. So while men will lose about 5 pounds on average during this age period, women will gain an average of 15 pounds during this same period of time. Now, there also tends to be a general decline in functioning of the heart as well as other organs. The trend of height continues in middle age, where women tend to experiencing a shortening of their spinal column caused by shrinking of the elastic disc material. And this decline in height, while quite small and almost unnoticeable during these years, does still occur. There's also significant changes in the skin tone of an individual. And so the color and texture of skin begins to change significantly. The elasticity, the composition, the texture, the appearance of these tissues changes significantly. As the skin becomes drier and loses its ability to retain moisture and becomes to feel rougher to the touch, with a loss of elasticity and an increase in the appearance of wrinkles, particularly in the neck, face, and hands areas. This loss of elasticity of the skin is enhanced by additional loss of subcutaneous fat, resulting in an increased tendency for the skin to fold and wrinkle. And the degree to which our culture equates personal appearance with youthfulness is something that is reflected in the frequency of cosmetic surgeries that often will take place during this period of time. There's also a decreased change in the person's nails. Nails tend to become thicker and change color during this period of time. There's also a change in eyes. There's several changes in vision and in eye function that you can expect in middle age. Some common symptoms of eyes are the gradual loss of accommodation, that is, your focusing ability. There's a depigmentation of the iris. There's a loss of retinal reflexes and changes to the lens of the cornea. One of the more noticeable changes relates to a loss of accommodation ability, resulting in the necessity to begin wearing glasses or bifocal lenses for the first time for those that didn't have glasses before. And there's also an increased appearance of glaucoma at this stage in life. And cataracts are a change in the lens of the eye that renders it opaque to light. And this condition is irreversible, but can be corrected with some surgeries or special glasses. The glaucoma actually is a group of diseases characterized by increased pressure from within the eyeball, and this condition results in damage to the optic nerve, causing blindness. And the disease can be controlled with medication during middle age, and individuals should have regular eye examinations in order to assess their status at this age. At this time as well, hearing loss may begin to be highlighted, as there's a declining ability to hear high frequencies, and there's a tendency for people that live in noisy environments to notice this much sooner. The threshold in which sounds where speech is easily detectable begins to decline with this age, appearing more prominently in middle age and as a person becomes increasingly older. There's also changes in teeth, and one of the primary changes affecting the teeth in the middle age is a condition called osteoporosis, and this condition is the leading cause of tooth loss in middle and late adulthood. Osteoporosis is an inflammation of the bone tissue surrounding the teeth, causing the bone to soften and become porous, and as a result, teeth become loosened in the socket and eventually are lost. The condition occurs really throughout the skeletal system, not restricted just to the mouth, and the cause of osteoporosis is not known, but it may be related to calcium within the diet. And so oftentimes there's suggestions to take calcium supplements, particularly for women. There's also changes in the skeletal system, obviously with the onset of osteoporosis. And individuals can expect to experience the first indications of arthritis and rheumatism in middle age. While both these conditions can occur at any age from a variety of causes, they are usually associated with the aging process. Arthritis is an inflammation of the joint, accompanied by pain and changes in the structure of the joint, and rheumatism is the term given to a variety of pains within the joints. Both these conditions become more chronic in nature in individuals that move through middle age and on, of course, into late adulthood. Osteoporosis, that loss of bone mass, is characterized here again as the degeneration of joint tissue that limits movement, and again, this is something that is where more women experience it than men, but it does affect both, particularly women after the age of 40 and men after the age of 55. There's also changes in the circulatory system. And there are three basic changes, really, that are observed during middle age. The first one is a decline in the elasticity of the arteries. Next, an increased accumulation of fatty deposits in the arterial tissues. And finally, a general decline in the pumping ability of the heart muscle. Now, something that is of interest to me is the area of the psychology of creativity. And it's very interesting in middle age and its association with creativity. Now, though intelligence in general tends to decline in middle adulthood, these declines do not necessarily produce similar declines in creative ability and contributions in middle age. In fact, the middle years may well be some of the most productive time for creative individuals. Some researchers have found that the decade of the 40s was the most productive for creatives in general, and individuals in humanities in particularly found a significant increase in their total creative productivity throughout their middle age period. Now, some of the research, though, seems to suggest that the number of superior works of creative individuals tends to peak in the 30s and then declines later on. But other researchers have suggested that creativity is associated, and the kinds of creativity are associated with different age groups throughout adulthood. Whereas mathematicians and lyric poets tend to peak in emerging and early adulthood, novelists and musicians and scientific researchers tend to peak in middle adulthood. There is also the phenomenon of marriage that is experienced in middle adulthood. Oftentimes there are midlife marriages, which is something that are very different from what has historically been. When life was shorter and people would die giving birth, or when people would die in their 40s and 50s, marriage was something that was done immediately. Now, oftentimes, marriage is set and delayed significantly into middle adulthood. Now, marriage satisfaction in midlife, what is that like? Well, what happens to the quality of long-term marriages, for example? Generally, what you can picture is marital satisfaction seems to follow a U-shaped curve. There's an early high point, and then it declines until late middle age, and then rises again through the first part of late adulthood. Now, the least happy time seems to be the period when most couples are heavily involved in child-rearing and careers. There are positive aspects of marriage, like cooperation, discussion, shared laughter, shared burdens, that seem to follow the U-shaped pattern, while negative aspects, like sarcasm, anger, and disagreements over important issues decline from young adulthood through to the age of 70. And this may be because many couples who are frequently in conflict divorce along the way, whereas marriages are often affected by stressful events in midlife. And if you don't communicate, then the tendency tends to be that there is divorce. In fact, there are a number of communication styles, what Gottman has called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, where if these communication styles are present, then it's almost a guarantee that the relationship will end badly. Now, let's take a look at singlehood in middle age. Approximately 5% of all middle-aged adults in North America are single people who have never been married. There is relatively little research on these groups and almost none on the positive aspects of their adjustment. But ordinary observation produces some examples that people with the absence of immediate family obligations tend to have intense career commitments. These tend to be people like priests or school teachers or charity workers. Now, there is also the issue of widowhood in middle age. Just as people must adjust to the death of a parent, many individuals in middle adulthood will need to adjust to the death of their spouse. In middle age, widowhood is applied both to men and women, although women more commonly survive men to become widows. Men have a lifespan during this time that sometimes there are activities or health risks that cause men to die earlier. And the result here is that there is longer life expectancy as well as a tendency to marry older men. Now, although more people become widowed at the age of 65 and over, the likelihood of remarriage at this age tends to decrease, whereas if you are a widow in your middle age, you have a tendency to remarry. Widowhood, though, doesn't seem to stymie personal development, particularly for women. Now, in this culture, women have a lot of options. These options include remarriage, retraining, adjustment in career, entry into the workforce, re-entry into the workforce, participation in voluntary organizations, devoting their time to their roles as mothers or grandmothers or to their community. But in adulthood and in widowhood, there does tend to be periods of time when you need to set aside time and express grief and bereavement of family and friends, because people will be lost. There's the need to meet companionship needs, and this is social companionship needs, but also sexual companionship needs. There is the need to fulfill the role of caring for others. But there's also the need to be protected from the quote-unquote good intentions of others that are giving advice about how life should be lived without giving consideration to the middle adulthood person's actual needs. There is the need to have sometimes assistance in finding a place to live, in adjusting to health needs and to occupational challenges and setbacks that sometimes occur during this time, particularly in widowhood. So those are some things that you need to kind of keep in mind as a person is moving through that middle adulthood stage. Now, if we are to think in terms of psychological development, Erik Erikson would call this stage generativity versus stagnation. And in Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, the stage takes place during this middle adulthood age from approximately the age of 40 through to 65. And it comes before that eighth and final stage in Erik Erikson's theory, which is integrity versus despair. So you're working towards integrity versus despair, but here primary task is generativity versus stagnation. During this stage, middle-aged adults strive to create or nurture things that will outlast them. They're trying to create a legacy in some way. This can be children, this can be reputation, this can be business success. And the striving to create or nurture things that outlast them, often by parenting children or fostering positive changes that benefit others. This can also be contributing to society and doing things to promote future generations and supporting important needs. These are part of what generativity versus stagnation stage of development is all about. It's important to note that life events at this stage tend to be less age-specific than they are during early and late stage life. The major events that contribute to this stage, such as marriage, work, and child rearing, can occur at any point during the broad span of middle adulthood. So the main psychosocial conflict here, remember, is generativity versus stagnation. So the major question that a person during this period is struggling with is, how can I contribute to the world, and how can I care for the world? And care really becomes the meaningful value, the meaningful virtue of this stage. And the two major events that tend to take place to support generativity are, number one, parenthood, and number two, meaningful work. So here we're dealing with, and it isn't that necessarily that you have to be a parent and a biological parent, but it's caring for others and having meaningful work. What are generativity and stagnation then? To understand this stage of middle adulthood development, it's helpful to know what we mean by these terms. Now, in terms of generativity, we really mean making your mark in the world by caring for others, as well as through creating and accomplishing things that make the world a better place. And ideally, these things will last. The key characteristics of generativity will include developing relationships with family, supporting family, making commitments to the care of other people, mentoring and guiding other people, and contributing to the next generation. So these sorts of actions really are frequently realized through having and raising children. But they can be through other ways as well. Those who are successful during this phase feel that they are contributing to the world by being active in their home and their community. But not everybody's successful, so there's stagnation. There's that struggle that takes place on that continuum of generativity. We can't be caring for people all the time. So there's stagnation that we struggle with. And stagnation refers to the failure to find a way to contribute. Stagnant individuals may feel disconnected or uninvolved with their community or with their society as a whole. They begin to be self-centered and develop neuroticism. There's a failing to get involved with others. They're not taking an interest in productivity. There are no efforts to improve themselves, and they're placing their own concerns above everyone else. And those who fail to attain the generativity skill feel unproductive and uninvolved in the world. So there are some obvious benefits to generativity, not just for others that are being cared for, but for the individual that is doing the caring. When adults develop a sense of generativity, they benefit in a number of important advantages. The first is they're simply healthier. Research suggests that generativity can provide a greater motivation to initiate and maintain healthy behaviors. People who feel that they have the power to make a difference may be more likely to pursue health-promoting activities because they believe that such actions are actually meaningful. They have more positive relationships. For many adults, parenting plays a key role in their development of a sense of generativity. But it is not the only path. Erickson himself suggested that participating in the lives of others, whether that be one's children or friends or others, is an important way to gain a sense of making a contribution and a difference in the world. There is the desire to have greater productivity. And if you recall, I said this is the time in a person's life when they tend to make the most money. They tend to be the most productive in their careers, and the actions required to develop a sense of generativity involve taking an active participatory role in the world. Generative people are simply productive in a variety of ways, not just making money, but in teaching and mentoring and volunteering, both in personal lives as well as at work. And there's a greater sense of fulfillment for people that have generativity. Because generativity is focused on making contributions, people who are able to develop this skill are also more likely to experience a greater sense of satisfaction within themselves and with life in general. They are able to look at their life and their family and work and feel that they have lived a life of consequence and joy. And part of this involves increased community involvement. During the early part of this adulthood, parenting and family tend to be the dominant factors contributing to the development of generativity. But the research has also found that simply giving assistance to others, often in the form of civic engagement, of helping the community, plays a role in generativity as people age through this middle-aged period. And what contributes to generativity? Well, there seem to be a number of factors that can contribute to the development of either generativity or stagnation during middle age. And here's a few things to consider. First off, take pride in your work, take pride in your family. Do work that is meaningful to you and that you care about. This aspect of generativity versus stagnation stage is centered on the sense of pride that adults take in their families and their children. In many ways, it mirrors the autonomy versus shame and doubt stage in early childhood. Pride can occur through parenting, although not all people who produce offspring become supportive and giving parents. Plus, those who do not have children are still able to give to the next generation in many meaningful ways. Part of this generativity is feeling included, a feeling that you're part of something, whether it is a family unit or a larger group or community. It's essential for the development of generativity. The centers on here the scope of caregiving activities and on what and who an individual is willing to include in their life. Now, research indicates that participating in social organizations can assist with developing generativity by providing feelings of inclusion. And this reflects the trust versus mistrust stage of early childhood. There's also the role of taking responsibility. As people go through adulthood, they must choose whether to take responsibility for their lives and for their choices. And this reflects the initiative versus guilt stage, seen earlier during childhood. People who take responsibility are more likely to feel empowered and in control of their lives and their destiny. You are the only person that can make choices for you, and that includes your emotions and your actions. And this helps lead to a sense of making a contribution to the world. And of course, being productive. Work plays a major role in middle adulthood, the middle age. So it's no surprise that an individual's sense of pride and accomplishment in their work can lead to feelings of productivity. And this stage, again, mirrors the industry versus inferiority stage of childhood. So you're making contributions, and as the generativity stage draws to a close and people approach the final stage of life, finding meaning plays an increasingly critical role. People reach a point where they are beginning to reflect back on their lives and their accomplishments and making it important to feel that these achievements have left a lasting mark on the world. So there's a self-knowledge and a self-understanding that becomes part of this latter portion of the generativity versus stagnation stage. Now, of course, there are times when this does not necessarily work out. And so there can be some consequences of stagnation where there's poor health, there is dissatisfaction in life and so on. But overall, the positive trend in middle age with generativity is, number one, to care for people, to care for your work, to care for your legacy, to care for others, and then to gain self-knowledge and self-understanding, and to recognize that you were the author of a good chapter in your life. And that is what makes generativity. And that is the mark of getting through middle age in a positive, generative, successful way. Hope you enjoyed this week. You take care. Bye-bye.